It is so good to be with you guys. I've had the chance to come for a few times, and some of you at this stage feel a little bit like old friends, but of course I haven't met most of you because this church is growing so fast. So many of you are new, and look forward to getting to know you today. Yeah, let's celebrate that. You can probably imagine how much I love Lou. Not only have I been here a few times, but we've had Lou at our church a few times to share and talk about what's amazing happening here. We love every part of it. So I'm really, really thrilled to be here. I have 4 kids. They're 25, 22, 19, and 7. Woo, yeah. The 7-year-old is with me on this trip. He got to make this trip, so we came in on Thursday so I could be at the Thursday night service. And then, of course, on Friday, we went into New York City. He's so spoiled. Gets shown around. We went to Statue of Liberty. We were going up toward Times Square, and because he's 7, we ate at Taco Bell. I couldn't believe we were doing that. But we were literally sitting in Taco Bell, just a little short of Times Square, and Elmo walks by outside, and he's like, "Dad, that's Elmo." He's like, "Why is Elmo here?" And then he's like, "Elmo's on Sesame Street. Sesame Street's in New York City." His mind was blown. And I got to tell you, he's having a great experience. Maybe only topped by, honestly, his experience in the kids ministry here. Thursday night, and I just checked in on him here. Those of you who serve in community kids, you are heroes at this church, right? It's just like, oh my goodness. So thank you. Thank you for being that kind of church. I feel like we're kind of friends now. And so is it okay if I tell you an embarrassing story about myself? Yeah, go ahead, Greg. You tell yours. That's great. So a few years ago, I got a call from the place where I had bought my car, the car dealership, and they said, "Hey, we have someone who's looking for a car like yours. If you bring it in, we'll give you a price on it." Listen, I know this is a shtick, right? Like, they just want me to come. Maybe they'll trade my car, so I'll buy a new car. But I was kind of curious how much my car was worth. It was 6 years old at the time, had about 100,000 miles. I like running my cars to the very end. And this was like the nicest car I had ever bought. It had leather seats. It had heated seats, which is nice in Chicago. And I actually thought maybe this is too nice of a car for me to have, until one of my friends came to me and he said, "Greg, it's a Chevy Malibu." Okay, it's not too nice. So I go to the Chevy dealership where I had bought the car, and I'm like, "Oh, I wonder what they would give me." And we're walking around the car. They want to look at it. "Hey, does everything work? Start it up. Let us hear it run," those sorts of things. And we're about done. I'm standing kind of by the outside of the car, and the person who's going around it with me, she has my key fob in her hand, and she said, "Hey, does the remote start still work?" And I said, "Oh, my car doesn't have remote start." She's like, "I think it does." And she pushed the button, and it started my car. I had my car for 6 years, and I didn't know that it had this remote start feature. Now, I tell you this embarrassing story for a particular reason. I see in this story 2 things about human nature. It's probably true in you. It's definitely true in me that kind of constantly I get reminded of out of this story. One is that we love to create storylines about ourselves and use, most of the time, we create storylines that will justify our current situation in life. We can just admit that that's true, right? We just kind of justify our own behavior. Because this is what happened. Like, before I knew I had remote start, if you had asked me about remote start, I'd be like, "I don't need remote start." I mean, my brother has remote start. You know why? Because he's a wimp, right? The remote start's for wimps and probably for rich people, right? Like, you know how much that costs? I would never spend my money on remote start. And then I got it. Actually, I had it for a long time. That's the second part of the story, but I realized I had it. And all of a sudden, I'm like, actually, you know who has remote start? Smart people. Smart people. I mean, I live in Chicago. You'd be an idiot not to have remote start. And so you can start to shape the story around yourself. But the bigger deal in our human nature is not just the changing storyline, but it is to appreciate that. Have you ever noticed you have access to something, but you haven't been tapping into it? And when you realize you have access, you tap into it all the time. I didn't use remote start for 6 years, but in the first week after I realized I had it, 30 times I started my car with this. And I live in Chicago, right? So like I would clear out my garage every winter so I could park inside. I didn't have to. I didn't know I didn't have to because I didn't know I had remote start. But it actually, when you have access to something you didn't know you had access to, it will change your behavior. That's the point. And, of course, this is kind of a goofy story about remote start. but I actually think in many ways it's a story about faith. And I encounter many people of faith, many people who are on a journey of faith all the time, and churches that we've started and other churches, and I'm like, oh, this piece of missing out on something that is accessible to you and kind of not knowing about it, but then when you realize there's a power of God, there's a presence of God you can have in your life that once you know about it, you will access it over and over again, and it will change the way that you behave. Listen, I see this in the biggest picture at Community Church. You know, I get to serve on this management team, this governing board, at least for a little while longer now. And, you know, we basically support Lou and hold Lou accountable, right? And I got to tell you, it's awesome because we love supporting a guy who's just like a racehorse of a leader. And he's the easiest guy in the world to hold accountable. What you see is what you get with Lou. He's the most transparent leader I've ever had. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is so good. And what's happening here, I mean, sometimes I wonder if as you're sitting in it, and this may be your very first weekend here or one of your first weekends here, like you may not capture how unique what's happening here, how that's going on, but it's remarkable. See, I'm from Chicago, right? You're from New York. I understand the tension, right? You're the big city. We're the little brother. We own it. We call ourselves the second city in that way. Actually, you know what happened to my son last night? He went out for pizza with the Pizzacillos, and he came home and told me that New York pizza was better than Chicago pizza. No, that's not the right response. You know, we have some movies about Chicago, right? I was reminded after the last service, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. We have Christmas Vacation, maybe the greatest cinematic masterpiece ever made. But New York is about miracles, right? Did you know in 1947 came out with Miracle on 34th Street, right? And in 1980, there was a miracle that happened in Lake Placid, New York. A movie came out about it called Miracle on Ice, right? And then, you know, you had a couple of bird strikes on an airplane and Sully puts it down on the river. It's called Miracle on the Hudson, right? And I'm just telling you, my experience with Community Church is this is a miracle on Long Island. We don't see this with other churches. And I just want you to appreciate, like you're in the middle of something, and actually some of you are the miracles, right? It's the miraculous thing happening in your life where you're trusting God in a new way. You're taking another chance on faith. How does Lou and the team say it? Like, oh, we're changing the way you think about God. Like, it's happening. And when you step into it, when you access a power and a presence of God that you previously didn't experience, it will change the way you live every day. So I want to tell you a story today from Luke chapter 5. This is one of the fascinating stories of Jesus' encounter with a guy named Simon. And I think it will help you and me see something about this church and its spiritual progression, and honestly, something about you individually and your spiritual progression. So let me set it up just a little bit. Luke is one of the Gospels, we call it. I usually call them biographies of Jesus. We have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. When Luke writes his, he kind of wants to get to the point fast. So Luke chapter 1 is kind of like setting up the coming of Jesus, the predictions that get you there. Luke 2 is the Christmas story. If you're in this setting at Christmas, or maybe you're around your dinner table and you're reading swaddling clothes and lying in a manger, that's in Luke 2, okay? Luke chapter 3, he fast forwards all the way to Jesus' adult life, where Jesus is baptized and he steps into his calling. Luke chapter 4, you start to see immediately, like crowds are gathered. They're fascinated by what Jesus is teaching. He's starting to perform some miracles. And so it's like, it's throbbing very quickly. There's crowds that are unbelievable. And there's actually a little bit of a story at the end of Luke chapter 4 where Jesus goes and heals a woman. It happens to be Simon's mother-in-law. That'll be just a little bit important here in a second. So then it turns over to Luke chapter 5. We're in the next morning here, and this is how the story goes. One day, as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, that's also called the Sea of Galilee, the people were crowding around him and listening to the word of God. Don't miss this. You may think of the word of God as the Bible, and that's fair, totally fair. But when Luke is writing this, there was no the Bible. He was writing a story about Jesus, and what he was trying to help us capture, maybe this will be a difference maker for you, is whatever comes out of the mouth of Jesus is a word from God for you. And if you would receive it as such, that's what has the potential to transform you. So Jesus is teaching us the word of God. He saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by fishermen who were washing their nets. So let me set the scene for you a little bit. Jesus is down by the Sea of Galilee. I'm going to turn my back on you just for a second. It's almost like he's backing up to the water's edge, and it's like an amphitheater of a crowd that's kind of just pushing in. It's almost like his feet are about to step into the water. And he looks over on the side, and there's a couple of fishing boats. And the fishermen had come in, because of course they fish at night, and they were cleaning their nets. That's what they do. They hung them all out. They're cleaning the fish guts off the nets. They're maybe mending the nets if they broke a little bit in the night. They're doing what fishermen do. They had fished all night. They are going to get everything in order so that when they come back the next evening, they'll be ready to go. It's not complicated. Then it says, Jesus got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon. Now, Simon is Peter. You may or may not know all the story of Peter's life, but this is one of the first encounters that he's having with Jesus. He had just healed Simon's mother-in-law the day before. And he asked Peter to put out a little bit from the shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. I just want you to notice, because I'm going to ask you to kind of lay your story on top of Peter's story here, on top of Simon's story. And maybe you could picture it like this. So Simon had fished all night. He's over here washing his nets, getting everything ready for the next day. He's probably honestly just kind of overhearing Jesus as he teaches. But he's open to it. Like, he's kind of curious. Like, sometimes overhearing something indirectly is almost as good or even better than hearing it, right? And Jesus comes to Simon and basically says this: "Hey, Simon, can I inconvenience you a little bit? Can I borrow your boat? Just for a second, can I ask you to stop doing what you're doing? Stop following your plan for your day and help me with what I'm doing?" I don't know if you've ever felt like you're in that kind of situation with a nudge from God where it's like, oh, I kind of had my plan. I kind of knew how my day was going to go. I kind of have a picture of this. But okay, I get interrupted. I'll try to say yes to a small thing. The story goes on. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Well, now, this is a bigger problem, right? I don't know if you've ever had this circumstance. Like, you had people over to your house. It was great. They all finally left. You got everything put away. And just as you're getting everything put away, someone's like, "Hey, I'd like to come over." That's exactly what's happening here. Peter's got almost everything put away, and Jesus is like, "Actually, could we go out into the deep water? Hey, Simon, could I inconvenience you a little bit more? Could I interrupt not just the start of your day, but kind of your picture of how your whole day was going to go? Can I ask you to stop doing what you're doing and start doing what I'm doing?" I don't know if you've ever had a spiritual experience like that. It is interesting. Simon starts to resist a little bit. This is the very next thing that he says. He says, "Master, we've worked hard all night and we haven't caught anything." He's like, okay, so first of all, nobody fishes during the day, Jesus. Second of all, we fished last night and we didn't even catch anything at night. This is a bad idea. I'm picturing this like Simon is looking at Jesus. He's like, "You're the carpenter, I'm the fisherman. You're the carpenter, I'm the fisherman. I know how this goes. I know what I'm supposed to do." And honestly, there was probably a little bit of a social thing going on for Simon, because his buddies are watching him. Like, what's he going to do? Is he actually going to go out during the day? Nobody does that. But Jesus had healed Simon's mother-in-law. I'll let you decide whether that would be a motivator or not if someone healed your mother-in-law. But something shifts for Peter, for Simon. And it's almost like, well, he drops the resistance. And he says this phrase. This is the phrase for today. "But because you say so." But because you say so. Not because I think it's going to work. Not because this was already my plan for today. not because I think you know better than me. I think I know better. But I'm going to put myself in a place that trusts what you're asking me to do. And not because it all calculates out, but because you say so, I'll say yes. Can I ask you all to say that phrase out loud with me? I actually just want you to practice it a little bit yourself, because I'm imagining you might need to use it this week with God. Because you say so. Let's say it all together. Because you say so. I'm just wondering, can you imagine this grid? Can you imagine this storyline for your life? That you are the kind of person who does things not because they calculate, not because it was in your original plan, not because you can engineer the ending, but because God says so. Or are you not that kind of person? Are you the kind of person where no, you don't get to interrupt my day? No. If I don't think it's going to work, I'm not going. No. If I'd be a little embarrassed in front of my friends, I'm not going down your path. This is a pinnacle moment in Peter's life. So they let down the nets, and then something happened. When they had done so, and I think it's important just to say hey, Peter actually stepped into trusting God, right? He didn't say, let me think about it. He didn't say, let me pray about it. He didn't say, let me do a Bible study about it. He just did it. And when he did it, they caught such a large number of fish that the nets began to break. So here's my question. Is that good news or bad news? It's good news, except for Peter. His nets are breaking. Now, don't miss this. Peter is a small businessman. He has one boat. He just fixed the nets. And now, it's amazing, right, that all these fish are coming in, but literally his nets are breaking. I don't know how you would feel about that. If it's starting to really mess up something in your life, it gets worse. So they signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so full that the boats began to sink. Can you just put yourself in his shoes for a minute? It is awesome, but also it's ruining things. Things that mean a lot to him. And I'm like, oh, these are all the tensions of the life of faith. It's interesting to see how Peter reacts to this. Think about this. The night before he had seen Jesus do a miracle. Right now he's participating in a miracle. And you might think he'd immediately go all in, but he doesn't. And I've seen this in many people's lives. Maybe you've seen it in yours. It says when Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and he said, "Go away from me, Lord. I'm a sinful man. God, you got the wrong guy. I still have a bunch of habits in my life that do not line up. I know they don't line up with the kind of people you must want to follow you. I have a past. I am a sinful man. I am not the kind of person that you would want to work through or use." And I see this. Maybe you've experienced this in your own life. You actually feel some nudges from God. Even being in this place, it's enlightened you about a couple of faith things. And yet when you're tempted to kind of go for it with faith, you immediately be like, oh, but probably not me. Probably not me. Not the kind of person I still have some habits. I still have some things that are way off from what God would want. Must not want me. And then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people." And he calls Simon on this day to be one of his first disciples, to follow him and be a person who's give up your small business. Come into something that I have for you. Simon had to decide. And honestly, it's good for us to sit in this. If Jesus asked you to give up your job, and it was as crystal clear as it is right here, would you do it? That's a step of trust, right? That's accessing something that's different. But Simon did, and he followed him. And I love studying people's lives because I think Simon's life isn't that much different than my life or your life. In that very moment, Simon could have said, "You know what, Jesus, I don't think so." and he would have went back to being a respectable small business owner in his town and lived out a quiet life and died a death. But through the one step of saying, all right, Jesus, I trust you, it changed the entire trajectory of his life. He now had access to a power and to a presence of God and to a higher calling that he didn't have before. He stopped going and living by the daily grind that felt like the same thing day after day after day and opened himself to something God might want to do in his life. And when he did, he became the leader of the apostles. He becomes the one Christ builds his church on. St. Peter's body is buried underneath St. Peter's Basilica in Rome today. You can go visit it. That's what happened when he moved to a place to say, I trust you. And I just want you to see how significant this is for a church as a whole and for each of you individually in your lives. You know, as Lou said, I get the privilege of serving on the management team for Community Church. We did believe in this church before it even existed. I made a visit out here to Long Island in the summer of 2019. And we walked around and we thought, oh my goodness, I sense something spiritual happening here. I think people are kind of rooted in tradition, but open to a new expression of faith. Maybe they have some misunderstandings of God. And if the right church was started here, it really could make a difference. And I pictured make a difference meant 150 people would be here. And now there's 1,000 of you. Isn't this crazy? So I'm going to just open the hood a little bit and let you see the world, your world from my perspective. This won't surprise anyone. When we start new churches, we have goals for those churches. We think, well, within 5 or 6 years, they ought to be self-supporting financially. On the front end, we and other churches, we provide hundreds of thousands of dollars. But that's at the beginning when there's no one here to give offerings, and then we get smaller and the responsibility becomes the part of the church. I'm like, I see that starting to happen here. We take responsibility for leadership and guidance, and I'm privileged to serve on this team. But one of the goals is that the church would be self-governing, that it wouldn't need outside leaders like me from another state and another town, but it would be led and governed by people from within our church. And you may not know these guys, but Jason and Steve, who are here, they've stepped up, they've joined this governing team with us, and we're kind of slowly transitioning from an outside team to internal leadership from right here. And it's so fascinating to me to see the leaders that are rising up here. And not just for that team, but leading groups and leading kids ministry. Like, that's the whole idea. The third thing that has to happen for us to participate in a new church project is we will only start a new church if we believe that church is committed to starting more new churches. As great as you are, I say this honestly, as great as you are, if you just are one and done, you do this church and don't start anymore, I can have a much bigger impact somewhere else. But this church is already helping start other new churches. This blows me away. It blows me away. So I just want to say to you, I see what's happening here. We invest in a leader like Lou. And you know Lou as a good guy and a gifted teacher and communicator. It's just remarkable to me. But it's not so much his ability to speak that is fanning what's happening here. It's because he has a posture to God that says, well, God, because you say so. Even when it doesn't all add up, I will trust you for what's next. Allie? You guys know Allie? I like her better than I like Lou. She talk about a leader of leaders. How she empowers people and has a vision and entrusts leadership to other people. You guys know Tom, right? Tom can play the guitar. Lots of people can play the guitar. Not everyone can take a posture to be like, but God, what are you leading us to do? What kind of environment are we supposed to create here? How can I lead with a joyfulness and create an environment? Like, it's supernatural what's happening here. And we see it. I just want to celebrate it with all of you. And if I could say it this way. I asked you when the nets were full of fish, but things were breaking, if that was good news or bad news. And I'm like, to me, that's community church. I'm not trying to call you fish. But this place is full. And I mean, some of you have been around long enough, you're like, that parking lot was broken. This place would not handle, and they did the parking lot. And now, let's do a Thursday service. Okay, let's do a 1 p.m. service. Like it takes a lot of people who would step up and say, I'll be inconvenienced, I'll serve in kids, I'll lead this way, I'll give to the, it takes a lot of that. And it's happening here. But more than the whole of community church, I love talking to each of you one by one. I've had 30 conversations this morning between services, and I see God at work in your lives. Lou sends me the pictures and videos from your beach baptisms. How amazing is that? How does that happen? Well, it happens because you open yourself to something. You start to access a power that you didn't have before. You, even if your friends or your family may not think it's the best idea, are still saying yes to what God wants you to do. That's powerful, my friends. You are stepping up to serve. You are stepping up to lead. You are stepping up to give. And it's actually only the collective nature of each individual at this church that is bringing about what God is doing here. And so let me give you a little bit of a grid. This comes exactly from the Luke 5 story. And we could put community church as a whole on this grid, but I think the right thing today is just to ask each of you to kind of say, oh, where do I fit in this? I call it the progression of experiencing God. If you study the scriptures and the way of Jesus, you'll see this progression happens in all these different circumstances. First, to experience God, someone has to be open to it. You can close yourself off to God. For some of you, it's part of the story of your life. For a long time, you closed yourself off to God. It has to start with being open to it. After you open yourself to it, it will ask for some adjustments. To say, hey, don't live your life the same way you did before. Can I inconvenience you? Can I inconvenience you a little bit more? Can I ask you to stop what you're doing and start what I'm doing? This is what Christ calls us to all the time. And it ultimately leads to, I'll trust. Let me describe each one of these three just a little bit. And I want to ask you today, not just to put yourself in one of the spots, but to imagine what it would look like to take a step forward from the spot that you're in. You see, to some degree, all of you have done the I'm open to it. That's why you're here. It's a big step for a lot of people who didn't go to church before or had a different religious experience to walk in the doors of a place like this. I say, well done. I'm glad that you're open to it. This happens at the church that I serve, and I'm just always thankful that people would follow that prompting. It is true that a lot of times people will walk in our doors, but they're still really skeptical, right? I'm not sure I would call the posture open. A lot of times, even when I'm teaching, I look out and people are sitting there with their arms crossed. Now, some of you have your arms crossed right now. Don't feel guilty about that. I'm not. But because it's more of a figurative posture than a literal one, right? It's like, well, I'm here. Prove it to me. It's not really a posture of openness, like, oh, I wonder what God is doing. And I want you to hear me say this. Most people walk in with their arms crossed for good reasons. You had a previous experience with religion. You had an experience at a church where all they wanted was your money. You've had all kinds of experiences that I think rightfully would cause you to walk into a place like this, and a place like this will be patient with you. To say, maybe I could uncross my arms and be open to what God's doing here. We should all also be honest that sometimes the reasons we have our arms crossed spiritually is not because of external circumstances like a bad experience at another church. It's actually we're protecting ourselves. We have a way we want our life to go. I know what the North Star of my life is. I'm going to make partner. I'm going to make money. We have a way we're aimed at. And we got to kind of keep our arms crossed, because if we open ourselves to God, he might start messing with my self-focused way that I'm building out my life. But I'm telling you, people in this room, you have abilities. That's great. God doesn't use people with abilities nearly as much as he uses people with availability. That you would be open to how he wants to work in your life. once you've taken the step of being open, then you get to the step of making adjustments, right? This is where, in our story, Jesus says to Peter, like, yeah, I know you're overhearing me. I know you're kind of fascinated by what I'm saying. I'm going to ask you to step into something. I actually shared this passage with our church about 6 months ago. And can I tell you one of the conversations I had afterwards? I had a guy come up to me. We had been recruiting him to potentially serve in our kids' ministry on Sunday morning. But he does shift work Saturday night. So he's up all Saturday night into Sunday morning. And so he was telling us no. He's like, I can't serve. And then I told a story, which was essentially about a blue-collar guy doing shift work on Saturday night. That's what Peter was doing. And Jesus said, hey, it's Sunday morning. Can I interrupt your plan? Before you go get your rest, could you do something for me? And that weekend, he signed up to serve in Suncrest Kids on Sunday mornings. This is what it is. It's like, oh, okay, I'm open to it. I'll make some adjustments in my life. I'll start to serve. I'll raise my hand if somebody asks me to lead. I'll be generous, like all those things. And then after you take a step of adjusting, and until you do, it's hard to see this, it starts to open up a new world to you to be like, oh, I think I could trust him. I think I actually could entrust my whole life to him. Now, some of you have minds like I do. It's an engineering mind. It's a calculated mind. And so when we set together our day or our next week or our next year, we start to be like, okay, well, if I do this and this and this, then I'm going to get this and this and this. And we set the course of our day and we don't let much interrupt it. But the posture of, I trust God, is an invitation to say, as I go through my day, and actually as I dial out my course to set my North Star, it won't be on the basis of, because I think it will work. It won't be on the basis of, because I got a plan for how my life is supposed to go. It will be on the basis of, because you say so. I will let that interrupt my life to such a degree. And this is where the questions in our lives that are prompting us spiritually shift from like, what can I afford, to what does trust look like? People make this progression financially, but financially is not even the biggest thing. It's like, oh, I don't know if I can afford to give up that time. But that's a different question than what would it look like to trust God? And today, I'm inviting you all to see yourself on this chart, to ask yourself, well, where am I in that spiritual progression, and what's my next step? In one of my favorite stories that Jesus tells in Matthew 25, he says, hey, there's three guys. They've all been given an amount of money actually by their master. And the three guys go out. Two of them take what the master's given them, and they multiply it, and they see it, and they get an affirmation from God. And one of them, because he's afraid, buries what God has given him. And I'm like, that guy doesn't even know he has a remote start. To the two that took what God had given them, their time, their energy, their life, their money, their resources, and said, God, I'll trust you with this. There's a very particular phrase that gets used with them. It is the phrase, well done. Well done. The whole phrase actually says this, well done, good and faithful servants. You've been entrusted with a little. Now I will entrust you with much. That is the story of Community Church. Well done, Community Church. You've been entrusted with a little, and look what God is doing. But ultimately, any church is just a collection of the stories that are within the church. And so today, I do want to ask you to aim your life at the North Star of the day you meet your Creator, wanting him to say to you, well done. I entrusted you with a few things, and you were faithful with them. Now I entrust you with many things. Well done. If that becomes the new storyline of your life, the story that you tell other people about who you are, I'm the kind of person who trusts God, who if he leads me to something, I'll say, because you say so, I will go. That's the storyline you want. You have a power and a presence that is accessible to you. When you trust God, you experience it. And then you see what life actually can be. I'm very grateful for you, Community Church. Can I offer a prayer over you before we sing one more time? God, your goodness is all over this place. I thank you for the conversations I've had this past weekend, for hearing about people in different stages of their journey of faith. I thank you for people who would take a risk to walk through these doors. And some who took that risk, and then took the risk to be baptized, and then took the risk to serve, and then took the risk to lead. And to see what you would do, God, when people trust you. And so I thank you for where you've brought this church, and I pray for its days ahead. God, that your goodness, your power, and your presence would be a storyline of each individual life here. I pray this in Jesus' name.